Hello everyone, welcome back to another Stop and Chat here at Skeehan Studio. Today I'm joined with Catherine and we're just having a really fun and slow conversation around personal brand, and particularly this sort of journey of crafting a portfolio and entering into the workforce for the first time. This week especially, we've received a huge number of portfolios from graduate designers and people looking to kind of pivot and start a new position. And we were reflecting on how difficult it must have been to go through a pandemic and try and study design, let alone now enter into the workforce, when so many of those ways of networking that maybe you and I went through have changed.
Yeah, so should we bring it back to sort of how you enter the workforce and vice versa?
Definitely. A lot of my journey was word of mouth and really conversational. So chatting with my tutors, who were essentially my early mentors, and talking to them about industry and where I wanted to go. The best part about studying, I think, just allows you to find a bit of your voice and where you might want to end up. But the true learning comes once you land and you get a placement. But it's very difficult, I think, for a graduate to prove that to a company and who they are. So a lot of the time it's coming from some kind of recommendation before then.
So during uni, were you going to, let's say, events? Like, how were you growing that network?
It was a bit old school, so some industry events, so attending like DIA design events and different networking local events. But more of my networking was probably done through my tutors and their network and kind of leveraging a bit of that. So they would suggest that we might attend Saturday in Design or go to semi-permanent, and through that we may know someone else there or one of the speakers, or you kind of leveraging their network. But at the end, when you're getting up to that pointy end of graduating, you're kind of leaning on them for some favours and saying, hey, I'd love a job at Breville. Do you think you can give me any insights or recommendations? Ideally, you'd want them to introduce you, but that's a big ask. So you're kind of trying to find another way to maybe get in. And sometimes that's just finding out who that person in that position of power is and just try and connect with them.
So really finding the exact, like getting to the root of a company that you want to work with, finding the exact person that you need to be talking to. Do you mean that sort of?
Yeah, and maybe this is where I'm jumping ahead a bit, where the biggest question is just trying to identify where you want to work. Back to our discipline being so broad, just generally industrial design, and I know you studied something different, but similarly those creative industries where these degrees are very high level and they give you a lot of opportunity to do a diverse kind of career. That can be quite overwhelming, I think, and challenging when you get to that end part of your course and you're building a portfolio. It's like, who do I send this to? Yeah, so anytime I'm working with early career designers, most of the conversations are around who do we want to send this to, and why are we looking at entering into that area? Why are you sending your portfolio to Breville if you don't want to work there?
Yeah.
If you love furniture or if you love automotive design, then let's get to the core of that. Let's try and find some people in that area.
Is it also about, I guess, finding out how large the teams are, like what sort of community are in these workplaces as well?
Yeah, you want to find everything out about them. This is why internships or other events are awesome, just kind of muscling your way into a company. Because you get a little bit of a look behind the curtain there and you go, wow, they have an amazing website and a really cool Instagram, but they're actually really boring people. And the work that they really do, the stuff that we don't see, is really monotonous, and maybe the team culture is not great, or there may not be room for growth in that position. Like, there's so many things I think you discover once you get a little bit closer to a business or a founder that you can help decide whether it's the right fit for you.
Yeah, and sometimes it is just trying out a job or having an internship, sussing it out, and if it's not right, that's also okay.
Internships are an interesting one because I don't think many studios are offering them anymore, or if I'm going to offer an internship, it's quite a structured kind of formal, it's almost like a trial essentially for a position, or you're really early on in your career, maybe first year uni, and it's just more about experience, sort of placement, and so your responsibilities will be very different there.
Why do you think that less companies are offering internships?
I think just the amount of energy that's required to make it meaningful, and this is where I tried to do internships early on, and I've done a number of them now, like probably 15 or so, ranging in time from sort of 3 months to 6 months, sometimes even 12 months, depending on where they are at uni or in their career. And they require a huge amount of energy. And there's this funny shift of expectation where it's like, well, I'm not paying you. And it didn't take long before we just started to offer our internships as paid, because it was just too much of that imbalance of you're turning up to volunteer. So how far can I push that relationship in terms of, hey, you didn't arrive on time, or I asked you to do this thing, and it's like, well, I'm not being paid. But at the same time, if you're being paid, then there's an expectation to deliver, and there's, even if it is a minimum wage, there's still an exchange there. And so I'm going to expect more, and sometimes you don't have the support from the team or from me to be mentored into being even understand what it is you're supposed to do. So it can get really grey, and people, I think, can get a little bit upset, both from the employee's perspective or the interns.
I think that's like an important lens to look through if you are hunting for internships, is there has to be both parties are getting something. And it's the same with mentor. Like we've talked about, I've always asked, why are mentors wanting to do this? Like what are they getting from this? And so I guess understanding that can help a little bit. I did like,
you've asked me that question before, like why do you do this, or why would other mentors do that? And I think it's that self-reflection on where you're at in your career, and that genuine desire to pay it forward and help someone else. But I think teaching also is a great way to hone your craft and talk through your own processes. So having someone that you're their mentor and you're working, and maybe we're kind of getting a bit off topic with mentors, but an internship's essentially the same thing, where they're ghosting you or your studio, and they're being guided and mentored. That there's a lot of responsibility there for that mentor to support that person in the right way and give them their time. It's a lot of energy as well, but it's a beautiful, rewarding process and experience. And when it works, when you're in that sort of flow state of having someone that is a sponge and is learning, it's a really beautiful feeling, because it allows you to refine your craft and kind of talk through your own methodology and be like, this is how I think you could approach it. But they're also giving you live feedback.
Can we talk a little bit about like getting your foot in the door? Because when we were talking about mentors previously, you were saying that it can be about just sending out an email and saying, hey, I can do this part for you, whatever it is, just to get your foot in the door. And they don't necessarily have to take you up on that offer, but it's just getting your name through. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's definitely a process, I think, to it that is actually, I think, pretty straightforward, and a lot of it just has to do with courage, where you just have to actively connect with these people. First, you have to identify where you would like to end up. So I would often say, pick your 5 studios that you'd want to work at globally. Who are they? What are they? Why do you want to work there? Figure that out for yourself. Then also come up with a broader list of maybe 30 more that are on the fringes of that. That's just the bucket now that's narrowing down the areas of design that you're interested in. But start to connect with those companies, especially if they're local. Like, just get in their scene and think of it just like the way that any other sales rep would go out and get a sale. You just have to aggressively and politely connect, and that can mean knocking on the door and like asking for a chat. That can be sending them an email twice a week. That can be calling their office. That could be liking all their posts on Instagram. It's up to you to decide on what your actual strategy is. But if you don't connect, they're not going to notice you. They're not going to come across your Instagram account or your portfolio, and they're probably not looking to hire. You need to get noticed. And it's amazing how much, even just a follow-up email, when someone sends me a portfolio and I may not reply, and then a week later they send me a nudge going, hey, I'm sure you're really busy, just wondering if you caught this. And then I might ignore that one and go, and then the next week, another one. And then I might write back going, hey, thank you, we're not hiring at the moment. Go, no worries, do you mind if I come past, and just introduce myself in person? So you've started a dialogue and you've started to build trust. And if you then turn up and you present yourself here at the studio and you have a chat and we have a coffee and we make a connection, I then know you. I know your face. I kind of know the way that you talk and interact. But more importantly, you've just got this action and you're hungry and you're taking steps into like your own control. It's that self-directed energy that I really appreciate.
Yeah, because you talk about that's what you sort of look for. in hiring somebody is that self-directed, and that just by doing that action of emailing and following up, you're showing that
totally
immediately.
I do it with clients all the time, where if I'm trying to win a new client, it's just like winning a job. A lot of the time, it's this courting process of just building trust with each other and them going, okay, is this the right design studio for my project? So I'll implement little things where I'll say, hey, I'll check in a month and just see how you're doing. And I'll immediately put a thing in my calendar for saying 1 month, call this client, and it's at 9 a.m. So when that reminder hops up on my calendar, I'm like, oh, that's right. I'll just go and send them a nudge going, hey, it's been a month, just wondering if you're still interested in this project. And that then prompts them to go, well, this person's actually very aware, and they're accountable for their actions. They say they're going to do something and they do it. It's like the amount of times someone will say, oh, I'll come past on Wednesday, and you don't turn up, or you don't send me that follow-up email, or you do and it's late. Like those little things are actually what kind of converts, I think, to getting noticed by an employer.
Yeah. So should we bring it back to, I guess, the standard portfolio?
Yeah.
When you're teaching, what is the sort of, do you have a set guideline of what makes a good portfolio, or are there rules to follow?
Yeah.
Where do you begin with that?
I'd probably put the portfolio so much lower on the pecking order, I think, in terms of things to focus on for getting a job to start with. I think a lot of people focus so much on the what, creating a portfolio, rather than why. And once you think about the why you're creating it, there's actually probably 3 or 4 things you can do first that have nothing to do with the portfolio that's going to get you that job. Right, back to some of the stuff we were just talking about connecting with that employer and your community. If you want to get a job here at the studio, you actually have to probably influence the team more than you do me, because you're going to have to fit in with them as much as with me, and you're going to recommend somebody and say, I think there's this really awesome person in this area, we should give them a trial. That's how you're probably going to get a job. So spend your time trying to find out who my team is and get to know them. They don't really care about your portfolio, they're just going to want to know who you are. So if we talk about portfolio and how redundant I think it is, and more about personal brand is actually what's going to get you your job, the portfolio document is great. Having something is, I think, important, because it just allows you to just focus your energy onto something that is able to be sent out and shared. And it's a little bit of a proof for who you are. Grades and a certificate mean nothing. I don't think I've ever looked at anybody's certificate, and especially not their grades. It's a recommendation and it's their body of work. So having that body of work is great. But as a student, you just have to be aware that your work's probably going to be pretty shit, because you've just been on this journey for 3 years and you're learning. And so I want to see that process of learning, but I also want to see how you learn, and are you able to kind of listen and grow and take whatever knowledge you've got now, and in 6 months' time be a new version, a different version of that. So the portfolio itself, I won't put too much stock into. I'd actually just want to get to know you as quick as I can to see if you're going to be the right fit and what other soft skills you've got.
Can a portfolio be just like your process and how you think? Like, is that, like you always say, that maybe the final finished image isn't really important at all, and it's just how you got there?
Definitely. The finished image is bullshit. Like having a beautiful epic render of a scooter that you've designed, a camera, a toaster, a chair, great. Like I think that's not something to celebrate. It's the process that you got to get there. It's your methodology and your thinking and your line of inquiry, and what were the steps and moments that you went through, and ultimately what is a problem that you're trying to solve. If you can explain that, if you can sit there and explain that to me in a conversation, or if that document can do it for me, that's awesome, because now I can see how you think, right? Because there's people here at the studio that can render better than you, so you're probably not going to be doing that part of the job. So what is your role going to be at the company? What are you going to fit in, and how do you contribute to the team while your skills are developing?
And how sort of, I guess, niche would you be looking? Like if you are coming out of an industrial design degree, it's a pretty wide array.
Yeah.
Like, should you be per company niching it down?
Definitely.
To have, like, project specific?
Ideally niche the better. Like if we talk about those 5 studios that you want to work at, I think you should have a portfolio for each of those 5. I don't mean you have to have a different body of work. It just has to have a little flair to it. So if you're in Australia and you want to work at vert design, I'd be making the portfolio feel like it already fits on a vert design case study for their website. So not only have you gotten their logo, but you've thought about the grid, the images, the layout, even the way they talk about their products. Just doing a quick skim of their brand and how they may present their work, you're then positioning yourself to align with that company's values. Similarly to Skeehan, we've got a completely different aesthetic to vert and in a different sector. So if you can just tweak your portfolio to make it feel like it connects with me a little bit more, it's going to feel a lot more personal. Because then I'm going to go, okay, well, this person understands, even if it's a toaster, they kind of just understand sort of, I guess, our methodology or the way that we might work through a project. So you've kind of got a head start on all the things that I'm going to hopefully start to teach you.
Yeah. I want to bring it back a little bit to the personal brand. I think people focus on a portfolio perhaps when they're not super confident, not very outgoing, and I guess being, hitting people up with email or face-to-face, going to people's offices can be quite daunting. What are some other ways, like I know I'm quite shy, what are some other ways to sort of make that network or get in front of people?
Yeah, it's pretty scary, and I get it. It's easy for me to sit here and just say, you need to go and knock on their door and you need to make 5 different portfolios. It's all a lot of work and it's kind of overwhelming as to what to do first. But even if you are, an introvert and you're not going to go and take some of those approaches that I said, you can still make a connection with a company and you can still send them an email. You can still comment on their social media, but you can also have an opinion and a commentary yourself. So before you've even done any work, if you haven't even created anything, we're talking like first year uni, you can still be contributing to Australian design. You can be liking images, you can be resharing images, you can have an awesome Pinterest page, you can have a great Instagram account of other people's work. This just shows that you're like a layer deeper. You're so immersed in this world that I can look back on your feed and scroll through and see that for the last 2 or 3 years you've been posting on design content, even if it's crap. Like, I love that. I love to see those sketches from your first year uni where you're learning what a Copic marker is to now in 3rd year being actually able to use one. That shows me development. I don't want to see that finished image, that's all perfectly polished, because I'm more interested in how quickly you've gone from knowing nothing to knowing a lot.
Yeah, I think another way as well is just ingrain yourself in your local community. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily, have to go up to people at events. But even if you're just going to openings, going to different things, and your face is there constantly, you're going to see the same people over and over again. And that's just a really natural way to sort of carve,
Totally.
your own position there.
That's awesome advice, because you sort of have this immersion of connection, and you don't even realize that you're building that confidence, and you're just being recognized and being there and being part of it. And so even if it's 2 years later and you might be sitting down having a chat, you'll be like, oh yeah, I was there at that event, and there's sort of topics to talk about. And you'll also find very quickly that a lot of designers are introverts, and we're also very awkward, and we don't like talking to people, and we have these weird things that we're into and that we do outside of work. And all of a sudden you're like, I found my tribe. I've actually found people that I can be friends with. I was going out to get a job, but I've found a community of people that I can call my friends.
Yeah. And then also to rely on your cohort if you are in uni. Like, you're all in the same page, so get to know one another.
Leverage that community around you. And I could just go on and on about that. So many of my early wins were down to other people that were like me but in different disciplines. So I was friends with architects, I was friends with photographers, graphic designers, people who were in hospitality and wanting to open cafes. These were just the people that I got to know, and we swapped services. We would just help each other out. And so I'd do furniture or help them build, a bar. Equally, they'd help me with a photo shoot or with branding.
Yeah, find those other hungry people.
Yeah.
And if you can't find a company to work for, like, just make stuff yourself.
Just be prolific.
Yeah.
Just create. And again, I don't care if it's shit. I don't mind if your work isn't good. It's not supposed to be good. You're learning. But what you're showing me is that you're connected and you're committed, and that you're producing work and sharing it. That takes a lot of courage, even showing bad work. And a lot of the time that it's not that good. You understand where the bar is, but you're still prepared to show it because you're proud of that journey. If we think about working at a studio, and particularly working here at Skeehan Studio, what are some of the things that you think we're looking for as a team in bringing somebody on?
Yeah, so I think being part of a small team, each person sort of has to wear a hat, and they've got to be almost their own manager of their role. So if you can stand on your own 2 feet, sort of direct yourself, figure out when you need to make changes, all of that, I think it's going to go a long way. I think it would be quite difficult being in a small team and you having to manage everyone down to the tiniest details.
Yeah.
So I think the more that we can do without coming to you, the better.
And just show me that you've asked those questions of yourself first, like before just putting your hand up and asking the question, that there was at least a line of inquiry where you attempted to figure it out. So rather than come to me with a question, you come with 3 answers. You just don't know which one to pick. It's like, that's awesome. I would much rather sit down with you and go, here's 3 possible solutions that I think I'm going to pick. As a group, can we pick which one, rather than, hey, what do I do here? I think, and that you can kind of pick it often with somebody when they're coming in for a job, is to just how do you approach problems, and are you looking for answers from somebody else, or you actively kind of have a bit of a methodology of solving problems?
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with like self-leveling up. And I think to be successful in like a creative industry, there's got to be some time spent outside of your role to be leveling up your interests.
Definitely.
And I think that transfers back into whichever like company you're working with. It's sort of, you've both got this path where you want to go, and so you need to be an active participant in moving that forward.
I think that's a common trait, I think, in anyone who's successful in any career or discipline. And I've been spending a bit of time really looking at some people that are, let's say, 15 years ahead of me, and trying to understand a bit of their path. And a lot of it is just that ability to just continually push and be curious and lifelong learners, and have strategies of just being able to just keep going, even outside of just whatever your job is, that you have that capacity. You're so curious and hungry and competitive that you want to learn new things. Yeah,
we call it like lifers.
Totally.
You're like in this creative industry for life. Yeah. And it really does show. I think you can tell in an interview if someone's just doing it because it was something that came across their table, or if they're really genuinely interested. And that's like, you can not be a lifer and still get a job at a studio. You just want to kind of communicate that and be really honest, because for us in a small team, that's exactly what I'm looking to invest in, is to people that are going to be here and be part of this tribe. Even if you transition out and go on to be this amazing designer for your own company or for somebody else, you're still part of our network. And I promise, wherever you end up in your career, like, you're going to be in this position where we're both going to leverage those opportunities, where we can work together in all these different ways, because I know you're just going to keep growing and keep learning. Yeah, what are some ways where you can learn outside of, like, for yourself personally? Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about maybe books and different tools that you use? Yeah, now that we're spoiled, I think, for choice, and it can probably be a bit overwhelming because there's so many short courses, not just from universities, but, this creator community and YouTube. So much of my recent professional development has been in a really unstructured way, where I just be setting personal goals and then trying to find the quickest sort of hack way to get there. Sometimes that's a short course, other times it's YouTube, or just leaning on a person, a mentor, and saying, can you help me get from here to here? So think of them like a coach. You've got to decide on, I guess, where you want to go, and then you find the best way to get there. But it's super accessible now.
So if I want to level up in business, there are so many beautiful books and amazing tools. I love audiobooks. I'm still, I kind of have this funny strategy where I'll buy the physical book and then buy the audiobook, and I'll listen to the audiobook, but then I'll flick through, and I like writing in the margins and folding tabs on pages. So I feel like I have this sort of analog connection, but it's almost like I'm rereading it. Like I've listened to it, but then I'm reading the words and going, yes, that's the bit that kind of stood out, and that's something that I might want to then action, as part of a homework task.
How do you find the time?
You just make time, it gets harder, but I guess it gets harder as you get older because there's more responsibilities, but you just get better at it. And this is part of refining your craft and learning how to be a professional. I still remember how difficult it was doing my first 50-hour week, and coming into the workforce and just having to be there and have the energy so that it's 3:00 on a Thursday and you're about to go into a crit with a client. You've got to be on. You've got to have that energy. Uni and some of the sort of early careers and some of those earlier jobs, the energy required and how long things are spread out and the kind of that self-managed time can be a bit of a trap. I think that takes a little while to hone that craft of just being a professional and working. And it's also something that I'll look for in a new hire, is that work ethic. And just having some experience working in other capacities is great. If you've had a job at McDonald's for 5 years, like that's a massive win in terms of you being able to understand systems and processes. But more importantly, you just know how to turn up. You can be there every day. You turn up and I can trust you to be there.
I think that is like one of the biggest learning curves coming out of university, is definitely the shortened timeline. And I guess do you have any tips for coming out of uni, going into the workforce, on how to sort of make that jump the easiest?
It is about just accountability and turning up. When you work for a company, I think the first thing that you'll start to notice is the pace of how things are very different in timelines. And you have to be very accountable for what you say you're going to do, and you have to be decisive and make decisions. Over time, that gets easier because you get a bit more experience and there's a framework there that you can trust some of those decisions. But really, it's sort of boiling down to just turning up with energy and being prepared to kind of listen and learn, and not be arrogant enough to think that you know everything coming out of uni. You're really coming out to then start your apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's something that we chatted about, was that it's also okay to not know things and to ask for help, as long as you've sort of tried to figure it out.
As long as you've tried to figure it out, and that you ask in a way that is sort of accepting of you just going like, I just need to understand this so that next time I will be able to do it, the way that we want, or you. And I think that's difficult. You're not just searching for the answer, but you're searching for a method so that you can understand kind of not just following the instructions of how to bake a cake, but kind of what brings all of those ingredients and sort of some of the reasons why you do certain steps first and not other ones.
I think it's really important as well is to put, as an employee, is to put yourself in your boss's shoes, figure out why they're asking you to do these things, what are they hoping to get out of this, and if you don't know, then ask. Like what does success look like with this project? Why are we doing this? And if you can hit those, I think it's worthwhile. And
I think that's hard, especially when we take on graduates, is that I just forget how little sometimes that they know, and that's okay. And you were quite good at masking it, where you would just be like, okay, lots of yeses, lots of and you were able to do enough of it where it's like, okay, you're very capable, but then there was just some moments where you would just completely drown. But you would have that courage to just sort of say, hey, I actually don't understand that. You haven't taught it to me yet, or I don't quite know what you mean. Can we go over this again? And as long as we can go over it just a few times and then you absorb that and go, okay, great, I can learn from that. Sweet, because then I'm also learning how to be a better leader and how to articulate what I want. And that's a big part of any growing studio, is that often, whether it's the founder then going to a manager and a manager running a team, they're also learning the best strategies to get the most out of their team. So you need to communicate with them on how you think and learn. And you go, yeah, Tom, that might work really well for that person, but the way you're briefing me and communicating with me, it's not really connecting, and I'm really missing these points. Can we maybe come up with a new way of going through a project handover?
Yeah, like a light bulb moment for me. I can't remember the exact project, but you gave me a task that probably I wasn't the best suited to, and I guess the right way of going around it would have been me delegating that to someone else.
Yep.
And I just hadn't thought, like, you've given this task to me, surely it's for me, but it would have taken me 1 second to ask, hey, can I delegate this out? It's going to get done way quicker and better.
And what's my time or budget, or what are the ways that I could do this? And also, I'm a bit afraid of this. Why have you given it to me? And sometimes you're being tested. Nearly every project that you're given is this sort of feedback loop between your employer and the designer, and seeing where they're at. Can they handle more responsibility? Can we allow them to take on more of a project? And so I'm constantly kind of testing that threshold there to not overwhelm you and give you too much work, but equally just not have you kind of just cruising and floating. And so you'll get these weird curveball projects that are clearly a way or an opportunity to see where we're all at. And then how you answer those questions says a lot about where you're at in terms of your own leadership position and project management and risk taking.
Yeah, and I think it's important to ask for feedback as well. Yeah, particularly if you come to an end of a big project, get that feedback so you can do the next one better.
And it's on the feedback absolutely is kind of on you and that own self-directed learning. So I think there is a lot of responsibility on me as the studio head to support the team and give feedback, but so often I'm already onto that next project and I'm thinking about something else, and I'm then pushing projects back down the chain to you guys, and we don't stop and celebrate the wins or take stock on what worked and didn't. And I think that's the opportunity for someone in your position where you can just go, hey, can we just spend an hour and do a quick huddle and just talk about that project and kind of where there were opportunities to improve it and where I think you could have done better. And then, because I appreciate that from my team, is that there's courage there to kind of push back a little bit and allow us all to be better. I think also what's nice to talk about is how hard it is to get a job, and how we have to embrace this rejection and failure. It's okay in the design process to design something 30 times, 40 times, just go through this loop of iteration, and we'll fill pages and pages of concepts. I think we're quite good at designers of just letting go a little bit of this personal connection. But when it comes to getting a job and going through this process, it's the opposite. We think we can send out 2 or 3 emails and then get an interview. It's not the case, right? So you have to get ready. And when I've talked to a few grads recently, and I'm like, you have to send 50 emails out. Like, that's a lot. It's okay if you're a graduate, 50 emails. Good luck even finding 50 companies, right, that you know about. So you have to sort of go through this sort of process of going, well, what are all the design studios in my area, in these areas of interest? And I have to email them, but not just once. Like, you have to connect with them on all their channels, email them, and then follow up that next week. And it turns out you're probably emailing the junior person at the company, not actually the founder.
Yeah. And do it really early as well.
Yeah.
Earlier than you think, before you've graduated.
And before you have a portfolio.
Yeah.
Like, what you're trying to do is just build that connection. So a lot of students will show me their portfolio and then ask for feedback on it. And then we go through this journey of saying, well, who's your portfolio for? And we start to refine it and craft it. And then they get all the way to December and then go, okay, who do I send this to? And then they find their email. You could have actually emailed that person 6 months ago. And so I think for anyone who's figuring out their next steps in that process of getting a job, the first thing to do is just to connect with that.
Yeah, flip it around.
And before you've even sent a portfolio, you don't have to attach a portfolio. You can just email them and say, hey, I'm a designer. I'm coming into the workforce. I've absolutely loved your company and everything about you from this particular project. What do I have to do to end up at your firm? What are you looking for in a designer? can I come past and meet the team? Is there any projects that you're working on that you think I could just ghost and shadow? These are all really nice, easy questions to ask that isn't a big barrier to entry, but it just shows that you're curious. And if they then give you a lead and say, yeah, we're looking for someone in this particular software, or you really need to understand this language, awesome. That gives you a target to then go out and learn that, then go back to them and go, hey, I've actually enrolled in this course to do Revit. Can I now come on and do an internship? As an employer, that just shows me that, one, you'll say what you're going to do. You'll do what you're going to say, and that you're actually accountable for some of your big decisions in your own life.
What are some strategies to stand out? I know that you've talked a little bit about the book, The Purple Cow, and it's to do with marketing, but I think this relates to your personal brand. Yeah, so
this is coming back to another mentor of mine, Seth Godin, who I've never met, but I just feel like he's one of those people that is the guiding compass for my life, and I've just loved absorbing all of his content. And one of his early books is called The Purple Cow. And to put it simply, it's sort of this idea of you're driving down the highway and you're just looking at these fields and fields of beautiful rolling hills, and there's cows everywhere and it's gorgeous, and you kind of just, this numbness of just seeing the same thing over and over again. But then all of a sudden there's just this moment where there's this little purple cow in the field, and it's like, what? And you stop the car and you look at it, and it's just this remarkable moment and situation. And not only do you notice it, but you'll remember it. You'll probably then, once you get to your destination, you're going to talk about it. And so the book is sort of about this framework around how to become the purple cow and stand out in this sea of sort of same. And I've always thought about that as a designer, about, okay, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of individuals, companies, people that are trying to, become noticed. And so what can you do to be that purple cow in your own voice, in your own way? And I was never interested in being a particularly controversial designer, and I was afraid of the spotlight, but I still wanted to show my work. I wanted for my work to be recognized and celebrated, but I was quite anxious, I think, about myself being known. So I was just trying to do things that just actively got my work out there in a different way. And early on, it was so freeing because the content that I would create, it didn't really matter. I think, especially looking back on it now, where I feel like so much of the stuff that we do as a studio has these pretty sort of serious expectations to it, because we're this company now and we're kind of trying way too hard to be this serious brand. But back in the day, you could just create and be really free, and we would just do silly things and collaborations with people and do photo shoots and create content that was really reactionary.
So it's kind of the perfect time when you're finishing uni to just do those wild projects. Just
do stuff. Don't talk about it and say, oh, I'm going to do this thing, or what about this idea? Just go and do it. And even if it's a shit version of that, just create it, document it, share it, put it out there, because even if it's 20% of what you hoped it would be, it exists. And then that actually, it's amazing how much those ripples just carry through. Even early projects that I did still get brought up and referenced now. And at the time, it was a throwaway idea that we just did with a few friends as a project, because what else are we going to do? We might as well just create something and document it and share it.
So if you'll say cold calling or cold emailing, are there any ways to stand out in that?
Oh, that's a great question.
I remember you telling me about sending through, I think it was like a piece of wood or something.
I feel like I've told this story a whole bunch, and it has worked. I did a version of this for an editor for InDesign magazine, and to Sophia Watson, who at the time was a senior editor of InDesign magazine, and she was this person in this position of power that I knew of through her work at InDesign. Her name was in the front of the magazine. She was just this amazing kind of creative and writer. And I was an up-and-coming furniture designer who had never been published, didn't even have a website. This is before Instagram, and I was just trying to get noticed. And at that point, InDesign magazine was like the point where everything happened. All of the people in Australia, all the brands were being featured there. This is sort of the one point where you would get all of your content for design and media in Australia. And so I desperately wanted to be featured in that magazine because I felt like that was the gateway in for me to get noticed in Australian design. but how do you get noticed by Sophia Watson, the editor of InDesign magazine? And I'd heard on a talk that she had given that she would get like 600 emails a day for brands and people sending her stuff, like emailing her stuff. Her inbox like would max out and they would have to like find new storage for it. So she would just constantly be deleting anything that looked somewhat like an ad or a sell or a pitch. So she's getting press releases and she's getting all of this stuff. So I'm like, well, there's no way that she's going to notice me. And at the time I was reading a book called Guerrilla Marketing, and it was kind of the front runner for a lot of Seth Godin's content. And in it, within the first like 30 pages, there's this story about someone trying to get a job at a prestigious, firm, and a very similar kind of roadblock where there's, hundreds of CVs going through to this art director every day. They're not even landing on their desk. They're getting, deleted, put in the bin by someone else on the team. So what they decided to do was take their CV and fold it up into an envelope. But instead of just sending it directly from their house in London to the studio in London, they sent it on this kind of global journey, this voyage. I don't even know how you would do that. Like send it through all these other points, right? 3 or 4 other countries before it ultimately lands back on this person's desk. So this envelope arrives, as the story goes, on this person's desk, and it's beat up and it's got stamps all over it and it's twisted. You've got a pretty high chance of that person opening it, right? Because you're just too curious. It's just so different. You've just broken the mold. And once they've opened it, you're going to open it up, and it might just be the same portfolio as everybody else's. It may actually be worse. But what you've shown is a new approach, a creative way of thinking that allows you to cut through the noise and get noticed. And so very similarly, ripping that straight out of the book for Sophia, I just took a huge block of American oak, this massive chunk of wood that fit exactly the size of an extra large post bag, laser etched into it, hey InDesign, let's be friends, and then like chiseled out a little groove and pushed in a USB into it, and then paid like $60 postage and got this thing sent to the office. And I found her address in the magazine, because it's on the front page. It has her name and kind of the address of the studio. Sent it to her, and then crickets, nothing.
Oh, no.
And mind you, I've been emailing Sophia for 6 months now. I've been emailing all of the journalists and all the magazines, just trying to get noticed. Never had a reply. And then out of nowhere, I got this message back from Sophia going, "Hey Tom, what do I do with this piece of wood?" And that was it. And so then I wrote back saying, "Hey, just wanted to send you something just so that you would, be friends." And it just started this conversation. And she was like, "Hey, well, your work's not that good. Your photos are kind of blurry and a bit boring, but like we've got this event on, and it's this weekend. If you want to come up, and I can get you in and we can meet you and you can meet the team." And so I went up to Sydney and then got to meet not only Sophia, but the rest of the InDesign team and the people as part of the event. And from there, I started getting these tips and tricks on like, okay, Tom, your images need to be high res and they need to be labeled, and there's a press release and there's a process. And we've got an article coming up on, emerging designers in September. Maybe you could put something together for it. And so then I had a deadline. I could go back to Canberra and work through that in my own time and kind of come back to Sophia. But what it allowed me to just build a friend and trust very quickly for not a lot of effort or money. And it was trying to just cut through that noise and take advice from people or from a book and just action it. I could have sat on that idea, overthought it, and not done anything about it. And even when I sent it, I was like, she could really get pissed off about this. And she didn't know what to do with the piece of wood. She was like, do I chuck this out? Like, what happens with it? But I think there's a lot of opportunities for designers to just be designers in every way. Think about every problem in a creative way, and you don't have to chuck money at it. Just do it your way.
Yeah, that's sort of like your personal brand touch points.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to go to the effort of making a portfolio, make sure that it looks like a designer made it.
Totally. Just put something into it that's different than a Behance template or a Canva template that's got this sort of layout and grid like every other uni project. Again, the portfolio is not that important. Show me your thinking, and I'd much rather find out about your personal interests and other things that you do that make up the true 80% of your personality, because that's what we all need to spend time with here at the studio. That's like how you really fit in.
Yeah. What sort of impression are you going to leave on people that you come across?
Exactly. But again, back to, if you want to make an impression, that 10-page PDF isn't going to do it. Make an impression the other way. Right? Make an impression as, I want to be friends with you guys. I want to connect and get a recommendation. If you can't connect with me personally, go find a business that's on the fringes of our studio and connect with them and say, hey, can you introduce me to that studio? Can you give me a recommendation?
What are soft skills?
What do you think soft skills are?
I actually have no idea. I've never really heard that term before.
Oh, really? So it's like soft and hard skills. So hard skills like CAD,
You're right.
Photoshop, a language. Soft skills, though, are sort of more around like leadership and influence and creative problem solving, how to connect and sort of empathize.
The more ingrained, kind of.
These things that make up a big part of your personality and ability, I think, to fit in with a team and connect with a client and, you know, present. You know, a huge part of our work is actually sharing your own ideas, articulating your thoughts, presenting them to our team, but then often onto a client. They're those softer skills that I think are a bit harder to teach. I can easily teach you CAD and software and sort of other hard skills. But if you can come to a company where you can offer in some of these other like teams work, I think it's a really valuable skill set.
So I guess trying to show that early.
Yeah. And if you're in that early career and you feel like that's an area you need to professionally develop, then you need to dive into that. And if there's any opportunities for public speaking, if you can be part of the DIA or a community event, if you're going to do a Bunnings sausage sizzle, just make sure you're the person up on the till taking the money rather than the one cooking the sausage. And it puts you in this really uncomfortable position where I have to interact with people. I have to get to know them and immediately form a connection with somebody. You know, they're really great soft skills, I think, to bring to a studio environment. Maybe we wrap up with a quick chat about what you didn't learn at uni.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you, now that you've been working for a couple of years, anything that they didn't really capture at university that you wish they taught?
I think the importance on networking, to be honest. Like, it was something that I definitely learned after coming into industry. And I think I learned that by how we connected, the value in that. And I definitely, when leaving uni, I thought I needed to get my portfolio together and then, I don't know, go on to Seek.
Go on to LinkedIn
and find a job through that. Like, I didn't really think about that.
That's good. Let's wrap that up.
Yeah.
Well done.